Hey folks, this is Tully and welcome to more game dev, working on infinite retries to defeat the Demon Lord. Have not tried saying that quickly as an intro before. Turns out gotta slow down. Okay, so today we've been off stream for 3 days. We have not had a stream since Tuesday, and we've got a bit to review in terms of work that I've done off camera. And a little bit of cleanup for some of that work is probably what we're going to be doing mostly for the first 2 hours here. Primarily, I've been working off camera with Drixie on some art stuff, trying to figure out some art direction, kind of played with some damage formula stuff and some VFX graph a little bit, trying to figure out how I want to do some smoke, kind of fog of war things, or if I want to do that. But the main thing I spent a good chunk of Thursday and honestly a good chunk of Friday working on is this kind of map prop builder, which is a bunch of words that maybe doesn't make a ton of sense. Maybe a better way to think about it is that like it's a map environment tool, but we can just kind of jump in and show it. So we can see here that there is a fair amount in the central scene here of like props that we now have laid out. Drixie has done a pass on these. We're not super happy with them. I think when we kind of laid everything out, Drixie was the one who specifically said it looks like a bunch of pieces put together, but it doesn't look like a cohesive scene, which I think is a really great and like observation from her, very astute. I 100% agree, and so we're kind of trying to see if we can come to more of a cohesive set of props. But how are we getting all these props on scene? So I've been working on kind of a way of making it so that we can edit more quickly the environment. If you've seen some of the previous streams, you may have seen probably about a month ago, we were building some of the initial levels, or some additional levels, and I was kind of adding every prop manually. So I was coming in, adding a prop, copying it, moving it to the square I wanted it to appear on, and then having to run the game in order to see it load in. What I've since done is I've made it so that there is a large grid here that represents every single tile, kind of given a coordinate, and each of those points are might be easier to show it over here. There is a prop tile. In fact, this inspector probably doesn't make as much sense anymore. It was more for when I was editing with 2 monitors. So this will get a little trickier trying to show it all on one screen, but we will do our best. So if we click on one of these prop tiles, let's say 13.9, which is right here in the scene or right below hero behind this log. Now the prop tile doesn't just have an addressable ID, it now has 4 options for what can be on there. It can have a back option, a center option, and a front option for everything. So if we change the front option here to say, let's do medium pair of stones, then that appears here in the front. In fact, what might be even easier is if we show on this one, we'll set this to clear so that it disappears. So we have that medium set of stones here. And I can just click on this green little indicator to bring that up. And then in center, we could say, let's do a tree, and we can do one of the stumps, and we can put that behind that rock. And then if we want from there, we can also put something in behind that. So we could say do a purple set of flowers, but that doesn't really show up super well. And this becomes a bit of the kind of like level design aspect of things, trying to figure out how we're going to place stuff. Let's do a tall tree here, which again blends with the stump a bit. So we might want to do something that's more like the purple flowers here. And we can kind of see if we look in here in scene view, each of these objects are being placed kind of around the space on the tile. We're kind of figuring out where we want back, center, and front to be, but we're kind of placing these objects in layers now so that we can get a lot more depth in the scene. That all being said, still feeling like this version that we're showing right now is a bit muddy. It's not really coming across super well. Let's switch up the background music to this one. So one of the other things we were looking at was, instead of using these props, which I still really like the aesthetics of a lot of these pieces, but they are very busy. So we might need to bring some of it down into a more simple space, because when we start layering them on top of each other, it starts to be a little too much. So we're kind of re-looking at things. The next set of props I'm going to show are very much just a sketch. We're just trying to get shape more than we are detail on this. And so this set, we're not like, this isn't final art. That's really all I'm trying to say here. But we feel like this is feeling a little bit more in line with like the kind of structure we want to try and create with these layers. So this woods is feeling a lot more dense. There's a lot of like darker kind of trunks of logs in behind, and you can kind of see a much more clear like treetop kind of foliage leaf. You can see the leaf kind of more defined because these trees are a lot lighter in saturation, so the shadows really become a lot more pronounced on them. So again, not final art, but just trying to do something with these shapes to see if we can get something that feels at least closer and less busy than what we were seeing with the other props. In fact, if we turn them both on, we can see it's a lot. But yeah, so this is, I think, an art style I prefer, but we need to figure out a way to make it readable. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so what are we doing today then? We've got all this set up, but all of this is working from a pure editing standpoint. So I can come in here and, like I was just showing, we can zoom in on some of these individual pieces, and from there we can actually like change their options and display whatever we want. So we could also come over to, say, this one, and we could change this from this tall tree to clear, and we could change this front option to be like a white flower, which is being hidden, but like we can kind of change some of these different pieces. And that's really powerful, but none of that is actually happening when we run the game. So if I was to stop here and then let's make sure that we have disabled the debug show all, we have. So if we were to play the game with these props turned on by default, we'll see that everything's preloaded, which is obviously not what we want. We want the trees and everything to be coming up with the tiles as they appear, as they were in the previous rooms. So in order to do that, though, we're going to have to revamp the loading system. So instead of loading in with just an addressable ID, we're actually going to need to send in all this information about whether or not a prop is on the front layer, the center layer, or the back layer, as well as I do have a custom layer as well. And that custom layer does need a little bit of extra data for what position specifically you'd like to place that custom prop on. So we need to make it so that our generate level data script, which takes just an addressable ID, is not just grabbing just this information from the prop tile, but it needs to grab all of the different prop loaders is what they're called. So this value should be deleted by the time we're done. So let's get started on that, because I'd like to see what even something like this or the previous version I was showing look like with the props actually like sliding in like we were seeing before. Let's turn off the temp version for now. And really, because this system already looks at like prop objects and just grabs their data, all we should have to do is drag one of these underneath of room, and then when we do a save or a raycast, it should use that data. For the sake of making sure we don't bring anything we don't want, I'm gonna just disable this. I think actually it should be fine, because I'm pretty sure we wrote the code in such a way that if a prop tile is disabled, it doesn't get used. Yes, it must be active in the hierarchy in order for it to get imported. So first step, we need to modify the tile data to actually accept this information. So inside of tile data, or level data, this just takes an, oh no, it is the tile data. Each individual tile has its own information about a content addressable ID, I believe is the term. It is. So we're going to need to have a couple of these. We're going to need to have a... We're going to rename it to prop because that's a more common term I've been using lately. So I want to try and have this be more readable. And we can say front prop addressable ID. And that should match the tool terminology. Center. We're going to need a back. And then we're going to need the custom one. And then the custom one needs some additional information. I think I'm actually going to convert it to be a point because I've been running into some weird issues. Custom prop position. I had it originally set up, I believe, in the prop tile in the prop loaders as a serialized vector, but I found that that's a little confusing sometimes because the XY values aren't always what I would expect. So we're going to change this so that this is a point value. And it can be default as 0, 0. And then custom vector won't have a Z, so we will also need a... maybe it makes sense to keep using serialized vector. It's confusing, but serialized vector has the height information built into it. It's just that we're doing like this X, Z, Y thing, which is somewhat confusing. Right, and that's because I wrote it as X, Y, and then height as a separate value. Let's leave it the same. So then in here we'll have a serialized vector 3 as the custom prop position. Okay, so that should be the data we need, and this one should be able to be deleted now. And if we go back into here, instead of just grabbing the prop addressable ID, what we should be doing is grabbing 4 of these. One for front, one for center, and this is going to be the center loader prop addressable ID, and this will be front loader ID. Like that. Okay, let's do this. Back, prop loader, back, addressable ID, custom ID, custom loader. And then the last thing we need here is we're going to need that vector, so custom prop position, and that's going to go to the custom offset. Maybe that's a better term for this, custom prop offset, so that we're consistent in the naming. Cool, and that should get the information that we need. Next problem, because the way I've done this, I've made a choice to make it so that there is a prop tile in every single location on the map now, rather than there being only ones for where I need them. This has been really helpful because it allows me to quickly just modify things by just clicking on it, rather than having to like copy and paste the specific one that I want. So that's great, but that means it's going to try and add data for prop data to every single one, and it's going to make every single tile a wall in that case. So we're going to need to have some extra information to tell whether or not a prop tile is actually set to something. So like, for example, this 12.9 is clear, 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 so it has no valid information set inside of it. Now, do we want to handle this at tile time? No, so the import, like, generate level data has happened once, So it might be a bit slower, but I think what's going to be easier is just going to be able to check every single one of these to see if any of them have any data set. So we're going to add a new value to the prop loader class, which is inside of here. And we're going to, actually, we just need a new function, which is going to be public bool is set, and see if this loader is set to anything, and it will be if the option index is not equal to 0, or more accurately, probably greater than 0. Okay. And then inside of the prop tile, we can write a function that is going to check is set. And this is going to make sure that at least one of these is set to something. So we can do custom loader dot is set, or front is set, or center, or back. And if anything has something set in it, then this is a valid prop. And we will go back in here and we will make sure that not only is it active, but also it is set to something. Cool. So this should prevent us from generating a bunch of prop tile information that we don't need. And that should be most of what we need in order to be able to actually test the import itself. So let's bring in, as much as I love this art, we're going to bring in the temp pass one, because this one at least is a little closer to at least the shape of what we want our dungeon to look like. So bring this in, and then we're going to raycast our environment and probably get some bugs. Looks okay. Let's take a look at the data it output. So under design data, dungeons, TO2. We have errors. There's warnings, but there's also errors. Oh, interesting. There is some extra code in here for generating walls that uses the content addressable ID, which we removed. Right, so before we started building trees and bushes and a lot of those other pieces, we originally were setting it up so that this could be used for putting walls on spaces. So we will leave the content object addressable ID for the wall system, which I will need to rework at some point, but I should leave it in as much of an intact state as possible. Okay. Now if we raycast the environment, did we get errors? We did not get errors. And TO2 should now have a bunch of information in it. Okay, so it's saying position 12, position 12. That looks right. But it is not right. Okay. I would not expect the position 12 tile to have this information inside of it. 12, 11. Unless my naming scheme for this... Oh, my numbering system for the tiles may be different from the tile data. Because technically the tile data starts off the grid because we have room for exits, whereas this one doesn't. So that's a problem. Mostly for readability and checking stuff. But I think it'll still just work. Because my system doesn't really care what this name is. It just cares about the position of the actual object. So the Raycaster will work, but there's a misalignment between the two systems. Alright, I won't be able to tell whether or not this is functional then until we actually try loading up the level. Continuing on the path, we also need to make it so that inside of the tile, once we have this data in here, we'll need to load each of the objects when that tile is loaded. So right now it's loading this content object addressable ID, which we'll leave in place for the wall system. We'll make a new... We're going to need to repeat ourselves a little bit. Let's look at how the prop tile does it. So the prop tile has a loader, which when it calls load does a bit of magic based off of the options in the above tile. And then it just loads it, instantiating it. And then when it loads based off of the layer position of that loader, it chooses where to set its position, and it's somewhat hard-coded right now. That's all fine. I think that's fine. So there's two options here. I can either have it so that it does the same thing inside of the tile, so that when we load up a front layer object, it says, oh, it's a front layer object? Okay, well, this is the offset that it should have. Or perhaps every time we generate level data, it should have inside of the core tile data, not just the ID, but also its offset. That way, if we ever decide to modify the tooling so it's in a different spot, old levels don't get broken. There's a future proofing here that I think I could do. But I think I want to... I don't think I'm that concerned. Yeah, we're just going to load each one. So we're going to load the front one, front addressable ID, as long as we don't have debug no prop load. And we will instantiate a new object. We will give it the front addressable ID, the position, the parent. And I guess the difference here is because we're doing each of these, we probably want to just embed a lambda function instead of creating a function for this. Which is a little messier. Gonna just go grab another example of where we do this. Like this. It's a game object, not an object. Okay. And then what we care about is get component tile offset, I believe. And then if it's a front one, we're going to want to set its offset, and we're going to want to make it the same as what we do for prop tile, which is 0.32. And I think that should get us our front layers props loading. Sure. Comment on YouTube. Sorry, bringing it up. This crazy gamer says, just wanted to say I hope you're having a happy holiday December. If I'm the one that made your Minecraft skin based on the Oblivion character, what, 14 years ago? Wow, I hope you're having a happy holidays as well. Sorry, like that is definitely a blast from a past. I think I remember the original name, but I'm not going to say it here. But anyways, I thank you so much, and I very much appreciate you creating that skin years ago. I think I still have it around somewhere. It's still floating. I don't know if I can still use it with some of the updates Minecraft have had over the years, but it's definitely a prized possession. Thank you so much for stopping in and saying hello. We want this position. So this is the problem with the copy and paste part, is that we're running into this problem where I'm having to create a bunch of magic values that need to be shared across multiple systems. It's maybe fine if they're magic values in the base tool. I'm going to keep moving forward. We might revamp this in a moment as the weight of this being bad code weighs on me worse and worse. You as well. I hope you have a wonderful week and a happy holidays. Yeah, because see, now I got to keep track of where I am here. So center is supposed to be 0.2 as the offset value. Okay, and lastly, we want to do this again for custom. It also feels bad that we're having to like copy and paste this code like so many times. Might make sense to make this into a function, but we're likely okay for now. I really just want to see this up and running, so I'm going to break a little bit of it, and I can always fix it off camera at a later point as well. Tile data dot custom prop offset. Okay, here and here. So those should be the same values. So in theory, if the raycast brought in all the data correctly, if we hit play, we should see the game load up with the props now, as we were seeing it when we were debugging and kind of building the map. We're getting nothing, so that probably means we hit some errors. The addressable system broke. Ah, we are not validating that the ID does not contain clear. Where do we want to do that? So clear is kind of our catch term to be like, hey, this value has nothing in it. So I thought, oh, I see what I did wrong. So I made it so if it's set, it means that it has to have an indice greater than 0, but we kind of need to do something similar here. So instead of directly grabbing this value, what we're going to do is we're going to make a special getter for this. So string prop addressable ID, and this will have a get function, and then in here it's going to return an empty string as the default option. But if the loader is set with something, then we will return the prop addressable ID. And then inside of here where we actually generate stuff, we're going to use the version that has that little bit of extra logic in it. Okay, now if we raycast the room again with everything turned on. Oh, we're still running, so stop the game, then raycast. Oh, we need to turn the props on. Raycast the environment. Turn this off, and then let's hit run on this. Still hitting an issue? The clear issue's gone. Are we just not zoomed out enough? No. Interesting. So we are hitting an error that is causing the game to not load the tiles. But we're not seeing any errors. Did the board generate anything? It did. It generated a ton of individual pieces. There it is. And none of these have any... Oh, I know what we're doing wrong. We, inside of the tile, probably set the board count up. And until that board count is decreased, we will never load the game because it still thinks we're loading. So we need to, when we load the object, also decrease the count of loading objects so it gets back to 0, which was done automatically inside of the original function. But because we're now creating our own lambdas, we need to make sure to do that in each of these as well. So that makes sense. There was no errors because the game just thought we were continuously loading. Okay, and that seems to be working as intended. Ooh, what did we hit? Some sort of error? No? There is something in my way here, so that means that we probably had a prop on this tile. Is it this flower? Yes, so there's a flower on the path here, which is a little harder to tell with some of the changes we've made. So let's turn back on the room. Let's click on from here, click on this tile, and we will clear that. And then if we hit save, it should auto re-import anyways, because that's how we set the system up. And that flower should no longer be in our way. Yeah, and now we're good. Okay. Well, that was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. That only took us about half an hour to get that hooked up. To be fair, most of it was done off camera. We had all of the systems for building all the data and having it all display correctly. It was really just sending all that data into our existing pipeline and having the game load multiple assets instead of just the one. One thing I'd like to try is if we come back in here and... Oh, because this is a prefab, it's like rebuilding all the data every single time, so we can't actually change things easily. So the flower is still there even though we've removed it from the entry. Oh, that's kind of a really weird problem because now it's not going to get deleted because it's been already flagged as a remove. Interesting. Okay, that's something to keep in mind. I do want to bring back in this flower. Ooh, does that break completely our system? It looks like it might. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to delete this object and do what we probably should have done from the beginning. When we bring it in, we will make sure to drop it in here. Okay, got it. Need to drop it outside of the space first, then put it under this parent. We're going to hit populate options just to make sure that that's all set up correctly. And then we're going to break unpack completely. I may have wanted to hit populate options after unpacking completely. Not entirely sure. Okay, so if we come back in here and we hit clear on this, that should have deleted the white flower, but it did not. Interesting bug. Why is that flower not getting deleted? Let's try it again. So we'll bring this back in here. Very first thing we're going to do is we're going to unpack the prefab completely. We're going to save. Then we're going to bring this in. We're going to populate options, which is a weird step I need to do for some reason. And then if we come into here and we change this to clear, it is not deleting the flower. And I can see from the blue outline here that it is still selected. Oh, you can't see some of what I'm modifying because of the VTuber avatar. Okay, I will put this window that doesn't really matter in behind my head so that I make sure to keep the inspector more in view. Okay, so this all works perfectly fine if I were to start from scratch and generate all of these nodes. So I feel like this is a problem with the metadata being saved. I'm going to try and fix this real quick while we're in the area. So what's supposed to happen, you know what, let's talk about it. I didn't really jump into and explain how these systems work, which means that most of this video is probably out of order, but we'll explain it here for the folks who have stuck around. So the way this is working is we have this generate prop tile. And this object here basically can generate a 16 by 16 grid, which is the size of one of our rooms, and it will try and set itself to be a variable inside of each prop tile. So each prop tile can know about the generate prop tile class, which is like the manager of all this stuff. It has a populate option, which is going to, given a specific zone ID, which is a parameter inside of this, it will then read in a prop JSON data, which we create when we generate all the props, which is another thing I've done off camera in the last few days, which we can show after. But essentially I have a list of all the props, and we get the data and we find the data for the zone that you've given, and we set all of the options, which is a list of strings, to be all the data for that zone, as well as inserting a first indice for clear, which is just, I don't want anything in this tile essentially. And then we go through all of the prop tiles that we have and we adjust indices after population, which is a little bit of an extra step that just goes through all of the prop options and checks to see if the prop addressable ID matches anything in the options. And if it does, set the option index of this prop tile to be the ID of that option in the manager. Really, this is just saying, hey, if we have a thing called like tree in here, and we added more props, we want to make sure that we don't change the prop to match the new indice. We want to make sure that the indice changes to match whatever the new list is. So we can add more props very quickly. Right now we have 52 different props that we're working with or playing around with. None of them are really final. But if we were to add more entries in here for more prefabs that we want to load, then we want to make sure that if the indices move around because of alphabetices or sorting, that we keep the IDs correct. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but point is that we need to just, when we load all the props, when we populate the option stuff, we want to make sure that we go through all the prop tiles and readjust everything so that it knows that the list has been modified. And then we have a clear, which just deletes all of the children. So really simple. But the main thing this is handling is all the options. This parent has everything for all these props to know in their dropdown. And then the prop tiles themselves are really just holding 4 of these prop loader classes that all do basically the same thing. They just have like an ID, and when we call load on them, which we are calling load every frame, which is expensive, but this is a tool that would never be on in the final game. We'll delete all of this stuff. But when we call load, it checks to see if the option indice is different from what we currently have loaded, and we don't have a load in progress. And if that's the case, we delete the loaded object, and we will update all the information and load the addressable of the ID that we want. And on load, we set the value based off of whether or not this is a custom front, center, or back layer prop. The option indices stuff is really just handling these custom GUIs for the script. So if we look at prop tile, and I guess the easiest way to find it is look at references. Inside of here, there's a prop tile editor. This thing is really just displaying the default inspector, but it's also displaying a pop-up drop-down essentially for all of the options inside of that prop tile, and it is displaying whatever the current indice that it had selected is, and when you change something in that drop-down, it's just updating the indice here. Again, this editor stuff is a bit complicated, but also pretty straightforward in this situation. We're just getting the loader, getting its option ID, and saving that as a serialized property so that we can then set the value and modify it. The only really important thing to remember with this stuff is that you always apply modifiers when you're done. And then populated ability list is just getting the prop tiles parent and then getting the options from there. And we just remove forest for the drop down specifically so that we don't have as much clicking to do. And that's kind of how this whole system works. So it's a little confusing, going back to the bug itself, it's a little confusing that this destroy is not working. So the loaded object must be null. Let's take another look. So in here, we see that the loaded object is set to something. So when this got set to clear on back, it should have saw that there was an object here. Let's see if we can load something else. Narrow? We cannot. Okay, so if we bring in a prefab of our setup, none of these options work at all. Completely busted. Although that being said, if I come in here and change this to scrub, we are seeing that the option indice does change. In here, when we adjust, do we also need to update the loaded indice option indice? Because we've changed the ID so what it displays is correct, but we have not changed the ID of what it thinks is loaded. Okay. So if we do this, and realistically, we shouldn't even have to re-bring in the prefab now. We should just be able to hit populate options, which will cause everything to update internally. And then we go back to here and click on this guy, change this to clear. I really thought that would work, but it is still not. Okay. We will have to debug then. So inside of load, let's add a breakpoint and see what's happening. Let's change things up again. A little too slow. Losing ground. Let's do this for background music for a little bit. Enable debugging session. Yeah, so again, this works perfectly fine if it's a fresh version, generated from scratch. But it seems that if I make it into a prefab and then bring it back out again, the system breaks down. Which clearly we don't want. Let's change this back option to something. Back to clear. We have a breakpoint in here. Are we just not calling load ever? Oh, I'm being dumb. Okay, stream dumb. None of this will work if we're not running the game, because update only gets called. So this all has to be done in real time. Or in playtime. That's the only way to edit things. Okay. So that means what we have to do, if we want to change this... That's actually an interesting bug, because I built it that way originally because I wanted to see everything live while we were running. But for simple edits like this where I just want to remove a flower, I shouldn't have to run the game. Especially because there's a little bit of overhead. Essentially, when we're running the game, Unity can't remember or won't remember all of the changes that we're making to these entries. So what I have to do is drag the whole thing out as a into the project folder as a prefab, then bring it back in and unpack it. Which is what we've seen me do a couple of times. But the reason for that is that every time we're playing, we have to turn it into a prefab to save our information. So this should work while we're editing. How would we do that? Could we simply, inside of prop tile editor on GUI inspector, call proptile.update? Would that make it so we could live edit? Let's do it at the end. This is gonna again add a fair amount of overhead to the setup here, but yeah, we hit the updater. Let's get rid of the breakpoints. I think this should work now. So if we come in here, it still has a loaded object. Okay, let's start from scratch. I think this change should fix everything. Or not fix everything, but make it so that we can actually edit while not running. Unpack completely. Populate options. Drag it all underneath the room. Click on the flower node. Change this to clear. It still is not deleting the loaded object. Okay, let's undo. Let's put those breakpoints back in and let's see what's going on there. Maybe destroy does not work in editor. It's possible. Okay, we're gonna hit this breakpoint a lot until we modify something. Okay, so let's hit clear. It has some value, so we're calling destroy. So we are calling the code, it just isn't getting destroyed. Is there any errors for this? There is. In edit, destroy can only be called in edit mode, so we do need to do destroy immediate, and that should get us working. Undo. Close too many windows. Okay. Clear. Perfect. So we change back to something like a fence, and then we clear that. Yeah, that looks to be working. We still have this asset here. I think that might be because we were messing around. Again, with things being in a broken state, it makes it somewhat hard to tell whether or not it's still bugged or whether or not it was just because we were modifying it while it was in that broken state. Okay, click on the node for the flower. Let's hit clear. It's deleted. Okay, cool. So now, actually this is a pretty big pickup. We can now modify data without having to load into the game as well. Won't be a perfect view because we won't be able to get the exact game angle as if we were running, but if we want to make small edits without having to create a prefab and then drag it out and drag it back in again, this is a little bit faster. Okay. And overall, this is just a much simpler way of like editing all of this data and being able to see it. And it undoes properly as well. Cool. So one of the things I wanted to show off before we went down this bug rabbit hole was I wanted to show that if we do set this to be like a, let's see, a white flower with maybe a, let's use one of the temp bush in front here. Save that. Still seeing some errors. That's because we didn't clear. And we run the game. We can actually walk through props now as well. So we can't by default. But if we take a look at... Oh, I hit it in Inspector. So one of the things we can do, if we make this visible, we can change the wall type of this flower section to be walkable and not a wall. And what that should do is we should be able to have a prop on this tile that is still a space that we can move through. And we can. Now, the only thing about this is that we step in front of it, which I think it's another case for a debate that me and Trixie were having about whether or not we should move these front layer tiles to be a little further forward on the tile. Because if it was just a little bit more in front, I think the values we determined was... if the tile offset was 42, or might have been, well, we'll see, 42, no, not enough, 44? Yeah, if it's 44, it would still be technically on the same tile, but far enough forward that it wouldn't clip with the player. Yeah, we still might want to make that change. It's just tricky because it brings the asset almost too far forward, so it almost looks like it's off of the tile. But we might want to do some like tall grass or something at some point, and this tech is, I think, good enough. There's definitely like a point where we just snap to being behind it, but I don't think it looks bad. Cool. So we now have the map loader working. We can also come in here, and if we want, we can clear this. Set this back to wall by default. Which I think these are all wall by default. They are. Yeah, so if we want to make them walkable, it is a very conscious choice. And they won't be wall tiles unless they have at least something set. Otherwise, we ignore this whole thing. Cool. I think that is a good state. Now, as for how these actually appear as they load up, I think that's looking okay. They're coming up in little groupings of 3, essentially. And as we fill in the whole space, eventually it starts to feel more and more like the edge of a forest. We probably don't need to probably don't need any breakpoints, so we can delete them all, and we also just don't need to be debugging. Yeah, again, this is not final art. Yeah, like this little stone tile probably should be walkable. I wonder if we might want to make some assets just default walkable. That's a bit of a trickier thing to do. But I bet you we could do that as part of the pipeline of setting these up. Just playing with... This tile specifically felt a little bit like it wasn't walkable. Ah, okay. It feels like these are loading on the same spot. Clear and clear? Something else must not be operating while we're at this period of time. Is it set offset? Is setting the local position. Does that not work? So, white flower with the front option being a... Interesting. So if we click on this thing, look at its actual tile offset. Ooh, it actually has the correct value. Oh, no, that makes sense. We have a whole bunch of pixel alignment code that makes it so where we put the reason that this is what we're modifying this tile offset is because we have like a pixel alignment system that given a specific spot, this object here, that's what we snap to. So this pixel alignment is probably run on late update. Okay. So then in order for this to work at runtime, we need to have it so that the tile offset not only sets the transform, it will also need to, as part of its creation, have access to the pixel alignment class, and it will need to manually call that update. Unaccessible due to its protection level. Now it's fine. Okay. Yeah, it's going to be all these little bugs that are going to take up a bunch of our time. Let's clear. Let's clear. Let's set a bush. Ah, that makes sense. We need to actually modify the objects themselves. So prop base is the main piece here, and that is going to need to have the pixel alignment, and then all of the other props are variants of that. So if we take a look here, none of these have that data set up. Interesting. I suppose that's reasonable. Let's delete this again. Bring it back in. Let's unpack it. Let's drag it down to here. Populate the options. And then if we clear this white flower, clear this, and then set this to be a large tree. That is now snapping to the right area. Sweet. I would guess each of these existing ones that came in won't be set up correctly, but anything we regenerate will be. So I suppose something that could be useful is some sort of like regenerate all assets, but not really super necessary. I saw a flash of red. Nope, no errors. Okay. What is this little tree here? That's this one. Is that preventing me from being able to see the tree behind it? It is. Okay. So let's change this one. Let's just clear it. Now when we hit save, it should regenerate all the props, and we should be able to see this disappear when we run next time. Okay, yeah. That looks better and looks to be working. The only other small change I'd like to make here is I'd like to, on this tile for the rocks, set this to be walkable and see how that feels. If I really want to make this feel okay, I think I could also just do 0.42 and negative 0.42 so it's really far forward. And instead of giving it a center prop here, we could do stones, pebbles at the front section. And then clear the center ones. And those should be in front of the player's feet as they move. That's the nice thing about having one custom prop, is that if we do want to have like tall grass or something and we don't want to modify every single front asset, we could just do it that way as well. So yeah, that's in front of Hero's feet, and then oh, interesting. That is not far enough forward. Oh, because it wasn't 4.2, it was 4.4. Some of these numbers are really weird, but it's just kind of the nature of like the isometric to 2D nonsense that we're doing. And then I have not set up a system to auto change the position, like to detect that this custom offset is changed. I'm only detecting when these drop downs are modified, so I have to clear and re-add it in order for it to actually shift. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. So again, sketchy environments in that we're trying something and trying to see what looks good and doesn't look good. But I feel like this is looking all right. That all being said, the pebbles are probably too small, especially with this raised up one. It doesn't actually look like Hero's standing behind it. So let's maybe just accept that this being on center is fine. We'll zero these back out again, just in case we ever come back to this in the future. And we have some weird offset set there. Although I suppose if we were ever going to use a custom asset again, we'd want to make sure that it's actually set up correctly. Okay. So we can step on the tile where the rocks are. Only thing with this is that because we have that tiny little pebble, even if we make it so it's behind Hero, when we walk, we will see a few frames where the boots are going underneath. Okay, so if we want to have an asset that Hero can walk through, it can't be tiny pebbles that are like spread out across the tile like this. They will need to be like more like grass or a bush that's like on the ground. Although even that maybe doesn't look the worst. What we probably want to do here is we'd more likely want to have it so that this is actually a couple of different layers of props, so that this rock can physically be further back, but still on the ground. Because right now it's floating a little bit above the floor, like that. If it was just at the same level of these rocks, but just on a further back layer in dimension, that would probably work. Okay, so we could do this, we just need to break it up into a couple of different assets, I think. Neat. Next problem I want to try playing with. Actually, I don't have a good asset for it. One of the things that Drixie would like to see is also having assets that float over the edges a little bit, so we can have grass that like comes down over the side of these tiles. I think that's just going to be a sprite with a offset that's like below the tile. Like, so instead of being positioned up on top, up around here, I think it'll be a sprite that'll be positioned essentially on the next tile over, and we'll only be able to use that when there's like void. Otherwise you'd have tiles clipping into it, I think. Yeah, but we can do billboarded sprites that would be out here in space, and then they look like they're coming over the side. But I don't have an asset, so we're not going to worry about figuring that out right now. Alright, so I think that's all I wanted to do for setting up the map. Still took an hour, but that was... I expected this to take the whole stream. So now what? Now what? I don't think there's anything else that we want to do until we get Drixie's help again to kind of create more new assets that fit this new style. So we likely want to move on. But what do we move on to? Well, I had Bugs and Polish as the other work to do. And then tomorrow we had penciled in build all maps, but I feel less inclined to do that now that I know that we're kind of still in this middle of like a revamp of how we want to make levels look. So as we still continue to explore that, it doesn't make sense to me to go build a ton of gray box levels. Drixie asked me to make a bunch of maybe like different sized gray boxed assets, so like how high I want certain things. Again, I don't think that makes sense to do right now either. I'd rather do that with her off camera at a later point. Let's go to PureRef. We haven't looked at this, or I haven't looked at this in a couple of days. There's a fair amount of polish work we still need to do. So we could just switch gears completely at this point and just work on some polish items. What did I have as in progress? Hide in Goddess Realm all the UI and have it show via flags. I think we actually finished that up in the last stream. We now have all of the UI being tutorialized as we play through the experience. Find a way to disable the tile revealing by sight in the Goddess Realm. Right, this was the idea that we could have certain areas of the map not reveal based off of you looking or walking up to them, but instead be revealed as part of cutscenes. We did start that, but I'm going to move that back here because we ended up running into some weird issues, and I don't feel like solving that right this second. Still haven't found the small variant. I forgot to ask Drixie about that. Spawn a particle for item, but we don't have a particle, so that one's kind of blocked. So much to do and nothing to do at the same time. I'm also so low energy today, but I'm loving the streams because they keep me on and doing something. We have a bunch of feature work as well that's been piling up. We half did this. Make flag ID and required state into a class and make entries for required flags a list above class. I think we did that, but did we modify the required component? We did it for some sequence steps and we did it for some other stuff, but I don't think we did it here. We did not. Yeah, we made a required flag class that needs to have all of the flags valid, aka in the state they want. So I think I want to drag all of this logic out to the required flag. So let's do this. So we'll have a list of required flags. Instead of directly using this ID, we will register a callback to refresh when any of these flags are modified. It's a bit overkill, but I think it's reasonable. So we'll go through all the required flags. And for each of them, we will do required flag dot flag ID, set a callback. We'll do that down here as well. But we will do that for the removal. Okay. And then here inside of set active, instead of doing this, we're going to have to write a little bit of logic. That's the set one. Is all flags valid? This is the function we want. We can steal this wholesale, put that in here. And then instead of checking the individual flags, we will do set active if all flags valid. And we will keep this little check to make sure that we have caught all the required flags when we go to modify everything. And that should work. Okay, then we just gotta update the data. Yeah, this is a small task we can get done real quick. And I think that's probably what the rest of this stream is gonna be until about 5 o'clock or so. Another 40 minutes. We're just gonna tackle some bugs. And then I'll do lunch or dinner. I want to go to Infinite Retries Dungeon. Actually, let's stop. Let's save. Infinite Retries Dungeon. Core front-end sandbox. And then inside of the combat screens, inside of base, we'll go into here. We have a couple of tutorial objects. These had the flags directly. We're going to make this a required flag so that it can have multiple entries if need be. Tutorial room needs to be completed. So this is kind of overkill for these and feels a little unnecessary. But overall it creates a system that's more flexible in the future. So that should be these ones. And we should be able to clear all of this data now and everything should work fine. That looks to be all of those. And I think we had three more. We have one here for the clock tutorial. And then one more set inside of this one. Oh, we want to do this inside of the object. This should also be applied. Okay. And I think we removed it from this one completely. Yeah, we realized it was causing problems. Cool. And I guess to test this, we'll have to go through the whole boot flow to make sure everything's still functional. Infinite retries, core boot screen. Okay, a little bit of dialogue here, and then the goddess will walk up. The UI should turn on. It does. Oh yeah, I had given myself like a large amount of time so that when we were testing, we didn't accidentally go back to the goddess realm. That's funny. More UI turning on. Perfect. Good. And if we go into console, we're not seeing any errors so far. And we should get our last piece of UI here when we see this enemy. Okay. So, that all being said, I think that that is a reasonable update. I don't think this... I can't think of anywhere else where we're using the required flag, so I think I'm just going to make the call to just remove this. I can visualize all the spots where it was being used before, so we'll just get rid of the old data. Cool. I kept it for some of the other ones because it was... some of the other required flag systems were so old, I couldn't remember all the spots they were used, so I wanted to have that as a backup. But now, this should be fine. And we can call that done. So we have finished at least cleaning up some work we had done the other day to make it so the required flags was a list, and now we could have multiple flags, each requiring different states in order for something to be true. Not up for simplifying the ability system right now. Easily trigger dialogue. I believe we have now done that. We have heroes speaking through much of the tutorial stuff, so that is done. We have that set up. Interact is not done. Switching around the order of the buttons in the main menu is not done. I'm leaving this one here because I think the bigger part of this is the options section. I feel like there's a whole controls option we should build at some point. I don't have an easy way of doing that. I don't feel like digging into that information on stream right now. This is interesting. So this is like prop loading, but having the prop be requiring a specific flag to be set. I mean, that should be easy with some of the stuff we've done. It's just more data that needs to be saved from the editor mode to actually getting put into the game so it works correctly. But I don't have an existing design that I want to accomplish with this. I want to do this, but I can't think of a situation right now where we're going to spawn a treasure chest or anything. So I think that's fine to leave on the back burner until something design-wise comes up that makes it more urgent. UI to anchor to or option to anchor dialogue to UI. Ooh, that would be handy. I definitely want that for some of the tutorial stuff. Anything else though? That might be a contender for something we could do. This is a neat idea, but I need to think on it some more. Oh, right. I checked some stuff in, but I want to back up and make sure that I had some notes. This is some more stuff with scenes. Basically, I'm thinking that I might want to generate the complete cutscene because every level should have one, basically. We should generate one when we save the scene and we add the scene design data. We should also generate an asset that is basically a cutscene at that time as well. And then when we do that, we should make it so every single one does this logic, because I kind of don't like this being inside of the board script. Nothing feels super urgent. This is maybe... These two tasks are probably the most fun things that I'd like to do. And they kind of have an impact on balancing, which is probably something we'll want to look at in the stream this evening. Yeah, let's start digging into these, I think. Like, looking over and reviewing everything, because I haven't reviewed a lot of this in a little bit. I feel like there's so much to do, but at the same time, a lot of it's like blocking on art and that like design decisions I just don't feel like making today. I just want to do simple small bugs, which with very clear, like, I would like to accomplish X. So I'd like to have it so that we could have the similar kind of surprise iconography during cutscenes, but I'd also like to make it so that these surprise icons from the enemies are not blocking actions, and I think they're the same task. I think it's making it so that we can just do like a little sequence of like, a motion, and have that be just very easy to do. Let's take a look at Dungeon Tutorial Room 3 with the slime. Let's start by getting the alert from the enemy to no longer be a whole turn from them. Because yeah, when we come in here, we get our little prompt, and then if we hit skip here, that's the whole enemy's turn. We end our turn, the enemy goes, and they just do a little alert, and then it goes back to us. And this is a good thing to dig into because I want to also do some work on the enemy AI and enemy types at some point. And I haven't looked at the AI system in a while. I think this is done. I'm just going to move some of these tasks to the done section. I also want to see what these look like because we were looking at the bugs and polish, but I think we've got the unlock order figured out. We did a bunch of work on this on Tuesday, and I think we had landed on having you choose your ability, and then I kind of have been really digging the idea of this layout for the initial unlock order for our skills. So I'm going to say that that's good for the time being. Design skill trees we still need to do. Balance passive we haven't really done. Bugs and polish. I think we've done the player's abilities. Oh, no, not really. We haven't created them. Honestly, that's probably a good chunk of work that we could look at doing. And then the other big one here is narrative cutscenes gated by flags based off of entering specific tiles and design data creation. So I think we've done the on specific tile entering part of this, but we have not done the design data creation for cutscenes. That's another pretty simple thing that most of the system is done. We're just missing the design data because a lot of it's hard-coded right now. I think these are probably good candidates for more work to do as well. Cool. Sorry, just cleaning things up a little bit. So, how does this enemy work? We have some sort of system where the AI exists with a list of abilities that they have access to, and they have plans for which ones they would like to do. If we look at the addressable that we're trying to load in this scene, let's drag the scene view up to here. So if we look at the actual enemy spawn, which we need to turn the gizmos on to see, it's trying to load the 3D enemy container. Okay. Inside of here, this thing has a AI evaluation system, a unit, and an AI beta state. how is it deciding what to do each turn? I know it has something to do with the attack patterns, but where is this getting referenced? Like, who's using this? AI evaluation, does it search for the pattern? Yeah, get component and children. A lot of this stuff is still based off of some Liquidfire blogs tactics tutorials from years ago, and I think I'm going to need to rip all this up and replace it soon, because the way that we do tile abilities is just so much more different now from kind of that initial kind of tutorialization. So much of our systems have changed pretty heavily, but I still think we wouldn't be where we are without a lot of that tutorial. It's really fantastic. If you're looking for like a good idea of how I got here, there's like 4 years of gap between the end of that tutorial and where we're at now, but like it's still a really good starting point. So this gets attack patterns underneath, and then as long as it finds one, it tries to pick one. It tries to pick a plan of attack. And then based off that plan of attack, it basically loops through trying to pick something. Right, and this is a pick system. We can have a random one. Essentially, when it gets that plan of attack, if it's not populated, it tries to randomly pick an ability, or if it's a fixed ability list, it'll try and go through and pick each ability in order, I believe. Okay. So if that's the case, if we take a look at the aggressive pattern, yeah, the alert is an ability, and it tries to find the alert ability, which in turn is just like doing an icon reveal. So that's fine. The alert being an ability is not inherently a bad thing, because we can play abilities in between turns. We have a system for that. The issue is, instead of taking their whole turn to play the ability of alert, what should be happening is when that enemy gets revealed, it should cue its alert ability with the ability response system. That sounds right. Is there a specific spot where we turn the unit on? Like when we reveal a tile, like they start attacking us and moving towards us, and they play the alert, but they don't do anything until they're revealed. How am I handling that? Is it like this init call doesn't happen right away? No, this all happens at the start of the loading of the room. So as soon as the room gets loaded, it will initialize all of this. Oh, you know what? It's probably handled by the AI director. So this is a class that handles the planning for all of the enemies and having them all take their turns simultaneously. And I bet you in here, it simply checks to see if the tile that unit is on, if its parent is active. Is that really all we do? Yeah, and if it's stunned or if it's not been activated, its tile hasn't been revealed, we just don't plan them for this turn. So we don't have like a set I've been revealed. That's likely a problem. Yeah. So we need to, inside the tile, when it reveals, check to see if that enemy has an alert ability, I think. Not what I meant to do. Inside a tile, where does reveal happen? Where does load happen? Here. Right, we separated a lot of this out of the tile, so now there's a tile animation, and tile animation handles a lot of the revealed. And is revealed is the moment that we when we set this, this is when this tile is fully up. Okay, right. So the moment that we set this value to not what it currently is, so if it's not revealed and now it is, then we should also check its contents. But we don't have the contents in part of the tile animation. The content or character we have is part of the main tile. Yeah, and other than the floor object destination, we don't really reference the animation at all in here. Does the animation reference the tile at all? It does. Okay. Oh, and we actually get unit and set their direction here on reveal immediately. Do we not do that otherwise? We do it down here as part of the reveal. And this happens before, not part of the sequence step, but just as soon as we call reveal, it just happens. Interesting. I bet you we can do this inside of here, so that whenever we set is revealed true, we get the unit and set their direction. Oh, I see. The reason we don't do this is that we probably want to reveal the unit and have their facing set before the tile starts animating up. So it happens immediately inside of the normal reveal, so it's up before we actually start the sequence. So I guess for readability, it might make sense to just move this above the sequence. I know that it's not going to, the sequence isn't going to actually execute any of this stuff till later, but this just makes it easier to see. Like, one of the first things we do before even setting up the sequence is just set the unit's direction. And we do it immediately here because we're just turning it on immediately, so the unit should already be there. Okay, but we can use the same logic, and we can do tile.getUnit. And then if that unit is set, then we can do like a unit is revealed call or revealed call that can let that unit do some kind of work to know that it's now up and running. Other than managing some of its internal classes, the unit doesn't actually do a lot of that work itself. So we run into this problem of who's in control. Who knows that we are now revealed? Who gets to manage that data? I feel like for the sake of my sanity, I'm going to make it so that this is not getting the unit, but it's actually getting component Oh, does this not even have information about the AI beta state? Because that's part of Infinite Retries, but all this stuff is part of Core. Yeah, that makes sense. I just want to be able to tell the system that this unit has been revealed. But I want to make it like a function call that does stuff. Okay, so I think what I want to do is I want to just work forward. So let's just try, like many of these other not permanent solutions, let's just try public void revealed inside of the unit, and let's see where this takes us. So we can do, if the unit is set, we will call revealed. And then inside of the unit, it can save a value to say that it's revealed, and something else can check to see whether or not the unit is revealed. But that still feels a bit off. Let's just keep moving forward and see. So a unit will start unrevealed, and then it will become revealed here. And if we take a look at the AI director, instead of doing current tile, we could just do revealed. Just say if the unit is not revealed, then that's the same thing. Okay. And then we had another spot where we were doing this right here. So we can now, instead of checking the validity of the tile itself to see whether or not it's actually on or off, which is a bit silly, we can just check to see whether or not the unit is revealed. That feels better. That's an improvement. But we can't tell, or we can't tell the AI system that it was just revealed. Let's take a look at the ability response manager, which is what we're trying to get access to. We're trying to get to this thing and say, hey, we would like to add a response. Right, it is this one. Yeah, we're trying to add a response that will probably be end of turn that will do the alert. can we get access right here? Could we just do ability response manager? We can add response. Yeah, and then we'd need to add a responsibility. Or alert ability, more likely. It just feels like the unit shouldn't be in charge of handling this. It's the reason I'm struggling with this is just like it doesn't feel like it should be its job. And this will be the alert ability. We'll need an ability target. The target in this situation will be itself. And then we'll also need a list of sequence steps, which I should have copied originally. Okay. So we're going to get the ability, we're going to try and perform it. We'll get out a list of sequence steps, and we will add that response along with a ability response type, and we'll make this happen at the end of the turn. And it shouldn't need any priority by default. Looks like -1 is what we normally put in here, which if that's so common, it probably should be a default parameter. That might just be enough. And there's no conflicts with core. All this stuff kind of exists in a way that it should be accessible. So then we get rid of the alert from the aggressive pattern here, so that the only thing this unit can do now is attack. All right. In theory, that should have worked, but it did not. If the ability alert is set. Okay, so the unit tried to alert on reveal, which is silly, but yeah, that's fair. Oh, we were running in sideways there. Did we break the run-in? Was there another error? There was not. Did we... we were messing around a little bit in here, but I didn't think we actually ended up changing stuff. Oh, we did move this. I bet you this does need to happen after. Weird. Okay, fine. There's some order of operations there that we broke. I don't know what it is, but I'm just going to put that back and hope that the run-in fixes itself now. Yeah, okay. That ordered mattered. So we come in here, we see the slime. But we are not seeing the alert. They are attacking immediately because we have removed the alert. Let's take a look at the response manager. If we go into debug view, we still cannot see the list of responses. We need to make this serializable, which probably isn't a terrible idea, just so we can visualize it when debugging. So there are 0 responses here. Okay. So it's not that there's a response queued up and it just didn't play. I guess we can... It's very possible that the alert ability doesn't work on the unit. Let's go find the prefab again. Enemy container. Go back to normal view. So alert... technically doesn't have any can target logic associated with it, but it would have been trying to check to see whether or not it can target normally. Interesting. It is a self ability range, so it should be working correctly. Let's put a breakpoint in. That's my best guess, is for whatever reason, when we reveal the unit, it is not able to target itself with its own alert ability for some reason. No, I'm not feeling these background pieces. Also sleepy. I really like Panman Music's audio, but I find sometimes that a lot of the ones I'm choosing to play, at least, are a lot of ambient background pieces. They tend to, especially on a day like today where I'm low energy, tend to make me a little more drowsy. Okay, breakpoints are set. Debugger is set. Let's see what happens. Okay, first reveal is our own character. Then we reveal the enemy. We try and check to see whether or not we can target. We're going to go down through the children. I don't think there should be any children with can target information associated with them. So we return false. So that implies that when an enemy tries to perform the attack through the behavior, it doesn't care that it can't target. That's an interesting conundrum. So when we go to AI evaluation, it tries to pick a pattern. So it's going to go into that pattern. That pattern is then going to pick one of the internal pickers, which in this case was probably a fixed ability picker, I think, which was one of these, which doesn't care whether or not it is a targetable ability. Interesting. Then we come back up here, we check to see if it can move. Target. We check to see if the ability target matches, which is making sure the alliance of the attack plan matches the target we're trying to target, but that doesn't actually call ability.can target. If we find references, are any of these... No, don't do that. Are any of these AI related? They are. Okay. Rate fire location. So when we try and determine whether or not this is a good location to move to, we're making sure that we can target. But I'm not seeing that inside of any of the other systems. Interesting. So this isn't really the problem at hand, but this does imply that there may be a bug in the system, because this ability worked fine when it was an action that enemy was taking for its turn. It would do the alert. But when it is an ability that we are trying to perform through the other systems, it doesn't work. Okay. Let's go into alert. This is good knowledge to have as we go into working on AI stuff eventually. That's a weird error. That's super weird. Okay, let's come back up here. Let's give it a target. Self. Ability effect target. Yeah, that was a weird one. Something about going inside of alert while inside of the enemy was saying that there was a problem with the ranged variant. Okay. So now that this ability can target self, it should find a targeter. It cannot. Alright, let's double check the typing. So when this tries to find it, it tries to find a ability effect target. Which self-ability effect target should have been fine. So we can do a breakpoint in here to see if it even hits this one. There isn't another ability target hidden somewhere on one of these, is there? That it's hitting before reaching this one? Oh, interesting. This needs a reference to self. And that is not set up. Default might be fine here. As long as our health is greater than 0, we can perform. I'm a little weirded out that self doesn't work anymore. That's possible. We could take a look at... Oh, no. Okay, no, this does make sense. So self was set up and used during a time when we were doing a ability factory construction where we'd make every single ability based off design data, opposed to making them each as prefabs. So when we were building it in code, we would set it. I bet you if we take a look in here and actually look at the references for this, I would hope it's used somewhere. Yeah, inside of the combat factory. It's the only one that does that. Okay, so if we just give this a default ability effect, I think that'll return true, and that should be okay. Alright, let's see if we have the ability being performed now. So I think it was trying to do what we wanted. It just, because the targeting wasn't set up correctly, it wouldn't work. It's just so weird that that worked when it was an attack pattern. Yeah, we get in now. It may have played and we just missed it because of breakpoints. Let's stop debugging and see what happens if we just run it normally. It did say that it got in. Oh, but we got a null reference. Okay, let's see if we can get that again. Yeah, immediately. Effect.apply. Okay, I guess that makes some sense as well. So I think what's happening here is that this needs to have an empty ability effect on it. Otherwise it tries to use it, it fails to find it. That's a weird, probably bad setup. We should probably just check to see if that child object doesn't have an ability effect, and if it's null, don't try and apply it. Okay, that's what I want. That is now applying the alert ability as a end of turn response, not as an actual action that the enemy takes. Super interesting. So what's a little weird though is that it looks like when the cutscene triggers, we immediately lose our turn. So if we have, this might just be a true fact, this is unrelated to what was happening here, but just I'm noticing it now because of the timing. But when we step here, we should be on 3 action points, and we have 2, and then we have a little cutscene, and the enemy immediately goes, and then we get our 3 points. Interesting. So our narrative cutscenes are, for some reason, cutting off the turn early for the player. I'm not even sure where to go to start looking at that. So this is an ability that exists on this tile. This ability gets played when the player enters that tile. So on enter abilities, on the tile, we load each of these on ability load. We set these to a list of on enter abilities for that tile. And then when the player steps on that tile, or any target steps on that tile, we try and queue responses. And then for almost all of these, we try and set them up so only the player can trigger it. We should double check that on these ones just to make sure that's true. Enemy tutorial. Yeah, it should be this one. Ah, it is not. It was originally a target spawn only. Can we do player spawn or player target? Player only target. Making sure the alliance is hero. Okay. So that, I think, should fix it. So this only target player only. This should be true for all of our tutorial objects, so we probably need to update each of them. Exit room. Yeah, also missing it. I'm just gonna copy this part. In here, this should now be named this. This should be this. Reveal room. Don't think it saved the name change here. No, didn't hit enter. Okay. That should fix those. Now. That gets performed. Sorry, minor bug fix, but yeah, so this queues up. It should now perform the ability. The ability should make sure that it can only target the player, and then the player's ability gets added to a response for movement. So movement responses are checking as part of the movement system, after we run... When does this happen? This happens not here. I'm assuming each one set it up themselves. Yeah. So after we traverse a tile by moving to that spot, we start the walk, start the turn, we start the walk, and then after we have finished doing our walk between tiles, we check to see if we have any responses in waiting. And if we have any responses, we run responses. And in here, we ask the ability manager to get and clear the responses for movement. We get a series of sequence steps, and we invoke those sequence steps. So nothing about this should be ending the player's turn. Let's go take a look at our state machine for combat. Maybe we can get a better idea why this might be happening from there. It's also possible the cutscenes themselves are triggering it. Actually, let's take a quick look at that. Does this have a cost associated with it? It does not. So it shouldn't be reducing the player's time. And it's adding a sequence and then playing the outro. Yeah, none of this should have any kind of effect on the turn stuff. We'll double check the addressable object itself. So this is going to be not under prefabs, but under, should be sequences. Sequences, tutorial, enemy tutorial. This is setting a flag for the ability tutorial being complete, and we're setting that we've had this cutscene, but neither of those things should be ending the player's turn either. Super interesting. We are at lunchtime, or dinner time. I keep saying lunchtime. It's because we've been doing a lot of 11 p.m. starting streams. So we need to break for food soon, but I'd like to finish understanding what's happening here. Combat state machine. Okay, so if we're in a unit's turn, if we've registered a transition, we outro. We're not doing that. If we have any end of turn responses, we transition to an end of turn response combat state. And then when that's done, we go back to the unit combat state. I could see that having problems. What does this one do? This is grabbing the end of turn responses. And as long as we're not transitioning, we go back to the unit turn. Which is this one. Which nothing about this should be advancing to the next enemy. Because we only update to a new... We only update to a new director, aka the AI director, if the round is complete. And then we go to next unit combat state. But this should just... I would think, or my thought was originally, that it should just go to this state and then go back to the unit turn. But that shouldn't trigger a change of directors. When do we modify this, just to be clear? At end of round. Okay, let's find out what's happening. this is where it would be changing to the enemy. So we'll put a breakpoint in here, and let's see what happens if somehow we hit this piece of code. So we still have one turn left. We are getting to end of round. It thinks the round's complete. So that's going to be the player director. Why would you think that we're done? Is turn complete? That means turn was set to true. Okay. Let's try again. I think I just need to move up the call stack. So we now need to see if the player's turn is getting set to true early. Somewhere. So that's a normal end of turn and end of round. This is a normal end of turn and end of round. We step forward, we should have 2 turns left, or 2 action points. Okay, this is fine. And this is fine. We are hitting this as part of an end of turn. As part of sequence complete. Here's the problem. So it's not so much a problem as much as a decision I made that I'm now rethinking. So I made the choice at some point to say that if you take a turn and there are any end of turn responses waiting, immediately have them go. And by making the enemies alert an end of turn response, it means that that now interrupts the player's turn and immediately ends it. Do I hate that? Or do I love that? So there's some pros and cons here. The pro is that it means that the enemy always gets to hit you. No matter how many action points you had when you reveal them, it's immediately like, it's go time. You know, the enemy's on you. And the enemy always gets to hit first. Which feels bad, but then maybe there's abilities that we could give the player, like counterattack or some sort of like push or something when an enemy enters into your tile for the first time or something. Like we could do stuff that would help mitigate that annoyance, which would make it feel more rewarding. But in the beginning, it definitely would feel bad that the enemy tends to get the first hit. But even if it feels bad, it means that you'll always be chipped. You always get like a chip of damage, like a little fraction of a hit, or maybe a big hit, by every enemy that you discover when exploring. So in exploring an area for the first time, it's very dangerous. But when you re-explore an area, the enemy will be alerted and have their turn before you. So I guess that is a question, is what happens in this situation if you enter into an area with the enemy already there? Do they just immediately get a turn as soon as you enter? Let's stop debugging. I now know what the problem is. Again, may not be a problem. It may just be fine. Like maybe it's just a decision that like, hey, when you go, yeah, so it's a little weird that you have to take one step, but I guess that makes sense because the enemy, you have to perform one turn. Because it does the check here on sequence complete, which happens after the player has performed an ability. So after you perform one ability, it will detect that the enemy has a queued up response. Somewhat weirdly, it doesn't happen on the start. And I guess that makes sense. We could make it so it happens immediately. So basically, when you start up a room, all possible responses can be queued. Reveal the enemy. So yeah, this was completely unrelated to the whole dialogue. All of the dialogue and narrative stuff was just a red herring. This would have happened if we did it in a room without that cutscene. Oh, interesting. So if we queue up the response immediately on room enter, that means they get to see the alert, but because the alert is happening before the player takes their turn, the player doesn't miss a beat. Huh. Okay. So I don't think this is... I don't think this is inherently, like, broken. There's just kind of a question of, like, why do we have to end the player's turn completely when we detect an end of turn response? I'm gonna guess that there's some other ability that we added that, like, we want it to be, like, immediate and happen right on time. But what this means is that when we first encounter an enemy, they always, like, they don't care how many points we have left, they just go. And then depending on how we want to set it up, we can either have the player have, or the enemy have their alert on entering the room, or we can have it on the player taking their first action. I kind of like it on entering the room. I don't dislike this, but I also am gonna have to think on it for a while. So when we reveal an enemy for the first time, they always alert and immediately hit us, and then we get our 3 actions. Huh. Okay. Okay. Well, we've done it. We've made alert immediate and non-blocking actions. In fact, now they're so non-blocking that they literally take control away from the player. We'll say that's good. And then surprise icon alert, I guess, was that just always a very simple ability? Was that already a sequence step we had? Icon alert ability effect. Yeah, so it kind of was. This ability effect is just super limited in its options. We could add some more parameters here. But if we want to repurpose this for cutscenes, it should be pretty simple to do so. And is this icon ID just a addressable? It is. Oh, it might still be. Yeah, it's just a not great named addressable. Yeah, we've got a couple of other ones here that we could use. Okay. Okay, cool. I got a break for dinner. This went a little longer, but that's fine because we have a larger break this time. We were doing a 1 hour break before, but now we'll go till we're gonna break from 5:30 is about where we're ending here, and we'll come back at 7. So in about an hour and a half. Yeah, low energy, not a lot to talk about. It's just now we're just kind of working through stuff. There's a fair amount of bugs and a lot of stuff that I think I'm just like I gotta make a call on, but I just don't want to make it. I don't want to make a decision yet. There's more to think about. I'm gonna have to make a decision at some point on some of this though. For now, I'm gonna keep hitting the low-hanging fruit because even stuff like what we just discovered, I wouldn't have realized. And it has implications on the balancing. With, like, the enemy taking the turn immediately. Okay, yeah, so we'll come back in an hour and a half at 7 PST, PM, 7 PM PST. And I think it's going to be more bugs and polish, but I also wouldn't mind trying to take a crack at a couple of these other ones. We do need to create all the new abilities and the ability skill trees in order for the tutorial to all work. So we should probably try and take a stab at that, probably more so than bugs and polish. But I'm going to leave it on here because there's a good chance we may just, you know, get through these things relatively quickly, and then we'll just keep working through the peer ref. I'll leave this here under in progress. We have not done it, but from the last task, it should be a lot easier now. It's just really just updating that ability effect to be more flexible for our cutscenes. Cool. Right. I'll be back in an hour and a half. I'm going to go for dinner, and we will continue.